Video games are not games anymore, they are living services. Just 10 or 15 years ago, it was uncommon for a game to be a service. In fact, it was improbable. But now, we can download our games, transforming the exchange process into a press A to pay and download game transaction. The traditional game model of making a game, releasing it, and moving on to the next one is almost over. Game developers no longer need work in silos, restricted from iterating and changing content on the fly based off of reactions from the market. They can make long-term plans for games. And because games are services, they are more flexible in this regard and are often referred to as living products. This shift in consumption has changed the way games are developed. Companies have discovered they can generate future cash flows by offering DLC, season passes, skins, guns, and rainbow ponies for cash, or simply by creating a game that will be supported and updated well after its release. Yet there is something ominous lurking in the shadows of game development these days, when developers mistreat the so-called long-term services they provide. The term games as a service was a byproduct of traditional expansion packs offered for games like Diablo 2 in 2001. Companies discovered they could tack on what would later be coined DLC by packaging and selling new game content for their old games. These expansion packs were fairly priced and much sought after, as it was the only way to add content into existing games. Starcraft Brood War was one of the most coveted of all time, mostly because it created the perfect storm, new features, yet it didn't fundamentally change what players had come to expect from the game. Years later, developers discovered they could take this process one step further by breaking down these larger dosages of content into smaller, cheaper forms. All of a sudden, expansion packs were replaced by the more agile DLC. Anything was up for grabs if you had a few extra bucks. Maps, skins, characters, weapons, perks, in-game boosts. Everything, it seems, is for sale these days. It almost has to be if you think about it. Keep in mind the cost for game creation is pretty crazy. For example, The Division cost Ubisoft over $50 million to produce. Combine that with the fact that they had no way to project how many copies would be sold given its brand new IP status, and you can imagine it's a very big risk. To shield against that risk, game publishers need to be able to generate long-term income from their games, which brings us straight to 2017. What games as a service, or GaaS as we call it, really means is taking this exchange system and using it as a platform for the development of a new video game. Make no mistake, it's to extend the length that a game is capable of generating income. That's a lot different than saying it's to extend the length that a game is capable of offering new content. Of course, we would like to think that video game companies have our best interests at heart, but at the end of the road, it's more about the money. But there is a very big issue that some game makers are practicing with service-based games that we must talk about. The number one issue facing games as a service is when developers exploit the system by bringing unfinished games to the table. It's almost oxymoronic if you think about it. Having a game be a service means that the game will grow, mature, and be supported into the future, yet many companies use that future timeline to repair and fix their games instead. The great irony of games as a service is that sometimes games get released before they are ready, with the sad justification that, hey, our game's a service, we'll fix it later. Someone very iconic once said, a delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. While absolutely correct, what Miyamoto fails to address is that many developers don't mind rushing games these days. Because they know service model games will continue to see development time, often they excuse the hard launch date instead for a soft start. How many times have you heard the words, "a fix is coming," or "that will be addressed at a later date," or worse, "we can always patch that out in the future"? The economic climate in the video game market promotes this kind of off-chance behavior, sadly. Many of us have been trained to excuse these unfinished games, seeing as how they will be quote-unquote fixed later, but we should not be accepting towards this kind of absolution. In 2017, it's almost standard to receive long-term services with our games, patches and updates being the good stuff. But in reality, the word updates can often refer to providing the bad stuff. Things like fixes, content that should have been there at the launch, or features promised yet underdelivered. Several games, even lately, have proven that the maltreatment of games as a service is a real thing and it's getting out of hand. SimCity in 2013, you are guilty. and the crew a year later. Street Fighter V launching without joystick support or a story mode. The Division's feature bankrupt launch is another one. You're guilty. Friday the 13th, the game, only a few months old, released in such a hideous mess of a state, asking $40 when in fact the game played like an alpha version of a $15 game. I'd talk about No Man's Sky 2, but I'd rather not sound like a broken record. And then there's Destiny. I think Destiny has got to take the cake as the biggest what the hell moment of them all. Sure, No Man's Sky was a big fat lie, but Destiny did no better. What a weird time to be a gamer, the pre-release promises of Destiny and trailers replaced by this hollow shack of a game. But hey bro, what about those updates though bro? There's gonna be some updates soon bro, we're gonna get that content you're whining about bro, so who cares how good the game is at launch bro? Well guess what broham, a lot of us care. It run up one of the highest bills ever for a game and a perfect fit for another trapping of the games for service mentality. The point of all of this is that we should expect better. There's no excuse in 2017 for developers to fill our head with promises and underdeliver at the sole rationalization that the game will be quote-unquote finished later. For the most part, service games were created for three reasons: to make sure we hold on to our games and purchase future content, to make sure we don't sell them in the used gaming market, and more importantly, to make sure we don't refund them on platforms like Steam. Refunds destroy profits for game makers, and they have to control it. On June 2nd of 2015, Steam opened the floodgates for the refunding of any new game bought on its platform. While some developers thought this might be a good thing, as it would give consumers confidence to purchase games knowing that they had a safety net, it didn't pan out. After 2 short years, the average daily refunds are still growing tremendously on Steam. It's a sad fact that many people cheat the refund system and use it as their own personal 2-hour free playground. Ultimately though, refund systems are a deviation of power from producers to consumers, from developers to gamers. This exact same shift when Meg Whitman stepped down as CEO from eBay in 2008, her replacement rolling out a brand new eBay that would change it from a seller's market to a buyer's market. Games for service have done the same thing, as gamers will be less likely to refund games that they know will be supported, fixed, and added to as time goes on. It allows developers to cash in on that faith by releasing unfinished games to the masses. Because sometimes gamers get fixated and play that hope card and decide not to refund them. But the bigger issue, people defending unfinished games, giving the developers the confidence and reaffirmation to keep putting them out. I would hope that instead you would join me in promoting that games be feature complete and in good working order upon launch, no questions asked. I have no problem supporting a game built as a service and continuing to give them my money as the game grows. I am not okay with them selfishly taking that time to complete their games that should have already been completed. So in the end, games as a service is a fine system and a great way to extend a game's life, but only if it's done right. Thanks for watching guys. If you'd like to support the work I do on this channel, feel free to subscribe to Downward Thrust and consider checking out my Patreon at patreon.com/downwardthrust. Have an awesome day everyone, and I'll see you in our next video.